If you were asked why you do what you do as a Christian, how would you answer it? I do what I do because I'm a Christian. It'll work just as well if I say, why do you do what you do, or why do you not do what you do not do as a Christian? Would you say, I do what I do as a Christian because God has told me to, and He has the power to reward and destroy? And you say, well, that might be all right for a little child, but that would be very legalistic for adult. Now give the adult version. And you think, well, all right, I'll do better this time. I do what I do because God has told me to, and I love Him, and I want to please Him. That's why I don't murder my mother-in-law. I understand He doesn't like it. Doesn't bother me any. But I don't want to upset Him, because if you don't please Him, what might happen to you? And you've almost deteriorated back to number one. And when you say you obey someone for love, do you know of any greater obligation than love? Sometimes there is quite a tyranny to love. When you say, do you love me? Then are you willing to do what I tell you? So number two may be a little better than number one, but maybe not. Maybe not. Does God want us to obey Him just because we feel so grateful? He's been so good to us. We don't think His rules are really any good, but He's been so good to us, don't you think? To please Him, we ought to do the things He asks, whether it makes sense or not. If you were standing in your home and heard your children behind the door saying, let's be good, at least for the next week. It's 1 week to Christmas. So let's be good all week because, can you remember doing that? There's even a song about it, isn't it? About Santa Claus coming or something. You better watch out. You better be good. Santa Claus is coming to town. Supposing you heard your children behind the door saying, why don't we agree, so long as we're home, to do what our folks ask us to do? They've been good to us. They've been generous to us. Besides, they're getting old. Now, their rules don't make any sense, but that doesn't matter. Look, we owe it to them. Let's be loving and gracious, and let's do what they say so long as we're home. Would you feel confident about their future? When you're gone, what are they going to do? Or when they've left, what are they going to do? Wouldn't you like to hear them saying something behind that door that would lead you to say, good, they'll do what's right even when I'm gone? Now, what could they say behind the door? Would this be what would please you most? How about pleasing God the most? Could you say, I do what I do as a Christian because I'm finding the longer I live, the more it is right and sensible to do so. And I'm seeing that more the longer I live. And I have great increasing admiration and respect for the one who so commanded me in the days of my ignorance and immaturity, when the only reason why I did those good things or avoided those bad things was that He told me to. And He had the power to reward and destroy, or I loved Him and wanted to please Him. At least it protected me. But I've come to the place now where I'm more and more beginning to do what's right because it is right. And I haven't had to think there's a command not to murder my mother-in-law for a whole year. And my mother-in-law's never been so safe. You see, if you have to check the 10 Commandments every morning not to murder your mother-in-law is walking on thin ice all the time. I think because God loves mothers-in-law and knows our tendencies, He had to say, thou shalt not murder thy mother-in-law. Shame on us that we required that. As a matter of fact, you think the commandments through. Do you remember when we were in Exodus, we considered this? What an awful moment in God's family when He had to gather His children around and say, I want all the murdering and the hating to stop. And I want all the stealing and the cheating and the lying and the immorality to stop. Please. That means it was going on. There was a day when God didn't have to do that, and there's a day when He won't have to do it again. You remember the new covenant? The law will be written in our hearts, and we'll do what's right because it is right. God will not have to lecture us 1,000,000 years down the line and say, I want all the murdering up here in heaven to stop. We won't have hated a soul for 1,000,000 years. We'll be doing what's right because it is right. Now if you heard your children behind the door say, let's do what our folks want. I mean, you'll have to admit that everything they ask us to do makes such good sense, we ought to want to do it anyway. And you'd get the impression that even after you're dead and gone, your children will go on doing what's right because it is right, because now they're maturing and they've come to see. Now, we're not that perfect as parents, so this doesn't quite work. But let's imagine it for the moment. With God, it does. When we say, God, the longer I live, the more I find that everything you've ever asked me to do makes such good sense, I ought to want to do it anyway. And now I tell you I do. Leading to the day when sometime we will stand in the presence of God and say, God, I agree with you. And I am pleased to do all these things that I used to do just because you told me to. I agree with you. And God can say, at last you're free. You've learned the truth, and the truth has set you free. And now the law is written in our hearts, and we do what's right because it is right, and not because we're told to. But until we reach that point, we need the law, and we need reward, and we need threats. We need all those things, don't we? But isn't that a condescension to our lawlessness and our immaturity and our ignorance?